Roughly 3 weeks ago, I had a meeting of my Ag Advisory Committee, which is made up of about 40 farmers. And I just want to stress the anxiety and the uncertainness in the ag community right now, where prices are at, where diesel has gone, fertilizer applications. And about 40% of the corn and soybeans grown in my district and the state of Illinois goes somewhere else around the world. Markets and customers are important.
40 farmers sitting in a room, scared, not in a campaign ad, not in a think piece, in a real meeting 3 weeks ago with their congressman, who then walked into a congressional hearing and said out loud what most of Washington refuses to say: the farming community is suffering and they don't see a way forward. Now, let's be clear about what we're talking about here. This isn't a fringe agricultural county somewhere nobody's heard of. Illinois' 16th congressional district is the 10th largest agriculture district in the entire United States. Illinois has led the nation in soybean production for 12 consecutive years. It is second in corn. The soybean industry alone generates roughly $7 billion in economic output for the state. Thousands of jobs depend on it. And 40%, 4 out of every 10 bushels of corn and soybeans grown there, goes to export markets. International buyers. Foreign countries. Which means that when tariff wars happen, when trade relationships collapse, when China decides it's going to look elsewhere, those farmers feel it directly in their prices, in their income, in their futures. This is the reality of the trade war that gets lost in the big economic headlines about deficits and leverage and winning. Out here, the people losing aren't corporations with lobbyists. They're farmers with diesel bills and equipment loans and crop cycles that don't pause for political negotiations. And that app article the congressman cited, April 13th, 2026, it's not theoretical. It's documented. When China imposes tariffs on American goods, China buys its soybeans from Brazil and Argentina. It has done this before. It is doing it again. And according to the congressman, quoting the article directly, America is, quote, not nearly as dominant in the world as we used to be in terms of a global export market of soybeans. That's not a Democrat saying that. That's not a media pundit. That's an Associated Press report being read into the congressional record by a congressman from one of the reddest agricultural districts in America asking for help. So the question is, what did the Trump trade ambassador say back? Watch what happened next.
Thanks. And with respect to the trade policy, agriculture is a big part of it. Anytime we do a deal with a country, we say there has to be an ag element. With respect to soybeans, we've obtained commitments for tariff elimination or reduction for soybeans or soybean meal. That's in Argentina, in Cambodia, in Ecuador, in Bangladesh, in Indonesia, and Taiwan. In addition to that, we have actual purchase commitments from Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Taiwan, Thailand. I had Mauritius in my office, small Mauritius. They had their first shipment of American soybeans in a really long time. So we're seeing diverse economies now coming, large and small, opening up, wanting to get their trade deficit down and looking to do it through soybeans. With corn exports went up by double digits last year. So when it comes to trade, we are trying really hard to do our part. And I know that USDA, our friends at USDA have been going around the world. All those countries I listed off, they follow up the deal with a trip from the undersecretary or others to go link together buyers and sellers in that market. I have a guy in Singapore who's a soybean trader over there, and I have him on my WhatsApp. He just keeps me updated on what's happening. So I'm happy to match up, particularly the USDA, who does export promotion, who can link up our farmers to these new buyers in these diverse countries.
And I think there's also collective concern about what happens with USMCA as it relates to agriculture. As you know, our ag economy has really benefited from USMCA, particularly our corn exports to Mexico, and that relationship has continued to grow. And you may have addressed this earlier, Ambassador, but as we look at USMCA renewal and where we're headed on that. What confidence, again, can you give to our farmers that that agreement is going to stay intact and those markets are going to stay vibrant?
Well, all of the deals that President Trump has made with any country, they have required the other countries to open their markets. Mexico right now is mostly an open market for agriculture. There are non-tariff barriers that we need to make sure that they either get rid of or don't adopt. We know on corn they've been an issue, and so they know they can't move on changing our market access for corn right now. So our goal with all of this is to make sure that we maintain market access into these countries. We do need to take actions to protect manufacturing. We have a huge, nearly $200 billion trade deficit with Mexico that doesn't make sense. So we need to make sure we control that. But part of that is making sure we can export and continue to export to Mexico to balance out that trade.
And maybe last question, what's the next step in the process for renewal in the timeline?
So on July 1st, each party to the agreement has to indicate whether they're going to do a renewal or whether they need to enter into a longer process of renegotiation. And then if renegotiation is unsuccessful, you eventually exit. I don't think we're in a position to rubber stamp the deal. We now have 6 years of data and we see problems. We also see good areas. We think ag is a great place. So we want to maintain that, but we do have other areas we need to fix.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Did you catch that? A congressman representing one of America's most critical agricultural regions, a state that has been the top soybean producer in this country for 12 straight years, comes to Washington and says his farmers are suffering. They're scared. They're watching their markets evaporate as China buys from Brazil. And the United States trade ambassador's answer is, we have Bangladesh, we have Cambodia, we have Ecuador, we have Mauritius, small Mauritius. They just got their first shipment of American soybeans, and I want to make sure you caught this part. He has a soybean trader in Singapore on WhatsApp. That's the plan. Now, to be fair, the ambassador also mentioned corn exports going up by double digits. He mentioned Taiwan, Japan, India, Indonesia. Those are real markets. Those commitments, if they hold, matter. Let's not pretend nothing is happening. But here's the problem. And this is the thing that the congressman was getting at, even if he was too polite to say it directly. China is not on that list. China is the world's largest importer of soybeans. China was, for decades, the dominant buyer of American agricultural exports. And when China imposes tariffs, as it has, it doesn't reduce consumption. It just redirects. It goes to Brazil. Brazil's market share in soybean exports has been growing for years precisely because American trade conflicts keep giving it an opening. So you can line up Bangladesh and Cambodia and Mauritius, and yes, those are real trade relationships worth building, but they are not going to replace what China represented. Not in the near term. Possibly not for a generation. And the farmers in Illinois know this. The 40 people who sat in that room 3 weeks ago know this. They're not asking for a list of new countries to pitch. They're asking whether the policy that cost them their biggest customer has any plan to get that customer back or find one of equivalent scale. The ambassador's list doesn't answer that question. Then there's USMCA. The congressman asked about Mexico, and this one is actually urgent. July 1st is the deadline. Each party has to declare whether they're doing a straight renewal or entering renegotiation. And Ambassador Greer said plainly, we're not rubber stamping it. 6 years of data, problems to fix, which sounds responsible, measured, diplomatic. Until you remember that Mexico is the #1 destination for American corn exports. That relationship, built over decades under NAFTA and then USMCA, is the single most important export market for the Corn Belt. And now there's a $200 billion trade deficit with Mexico that the administration wants to address, which means leverage, which means pressure, which means the farmers who depend on that market are watching a renegotiation with real fear. Because here's what renegotiation means in practice: uncertainty. And uncertainty in agriculture is not abstract. It affects what you plant. It affects what contracts you sign. It affects what loans you take out. Farmers plan a year, 2 years, sometimes 5 years ahead. Policy instability doesn't just hurt this quarter's prices, it reshapes entire crop strategies. The ambassador mentioned that Mexico knows they can't move on corn market access right now. That's meant to be reassuring. But right now is not the same as in the renegotiated deal. And that gap between right now and the final agreement is exactly where farmers lose sleep. Here is the bottom line. Illinois grows more soybeans than any other state in America, has for 12 years straight. 40% of that crop needs foreign buyers to survive. China, historically the biggest buyer, is now purchasing from Brazil because of tariff conflict. An app report from April 2026 says American dominance in the global soybean export market is diminishing. A congressman from that state asked for optimism, asked for results, asked for a clear path forward. He got a list of small countries, a mention of Mauritius's first soybean shipment, and a WhatsApp contact in Singapore. Now, to be clear, new markets are genuinely being built. Corn exports are up. The ambassador isn't making things up. But trying really hard, and we have a guy on WhatsApp, is not the same as a coherent strategy to replace the largest agricultural trade relationship America ever had. The farmers in Illinois' 16th district aren't asking for political theater. They're asking whether they should plant the same crops next season, whether the markets they've built their businesses around will still exist, whether the trade war their government launched had a plan for what comes after. Those are reasonable questions. And they deserve more than a list of commitments from countries that collectively don't come close to replacing what China buys from Brazil every single month. That's the story. Not dramatic, not partisan, just math. And math doesn't care about talking points. If you're watching from an agricultural state and you felt this one, share it, because this hearing is not getting the coverage it deserves. The people being hurt by this trade policy aren't in the financial news. They're in fields in Illinois wondering if the decisions being made in Washington are going to cost them their livelihoods. Subscribe for more coverage like this, stories that go past the headlines and into the actual hearings where the real decisions get made. Drop a comment below. Do you think the new markets can actually replace China? Let's hear it.